Is Kailash there?
Yes.
Kailash is here, yes.
Interpreters are there?
Yes.
Yes, interpreters are ready.
Excellent.
But Kailash's video is not working. His camera is not on. The camera is not working. It was working before, and now it's not. Ah, there we go.
Now it's
Okay.
on.
Ah, it went off again. There we go.
There we go. Please go ahead, Gabriela. Show is yours.
Hang on. Wait a minute. Let me actually start the webinar, let the public in. You might want to wait 1 minute, Gabriela, until the public actually arrives. I'm going to start the webinar now. Everyone can turn off our microphones, and you'll be able to see the number of spectators as they arrive.
Okay, so you will give me the cue, or should I just launch when I see the time is ripe?
I would, well, the time
On va
is
se caler sur le
late.
temps, Alexandra, pour avoir une référence.
I would suggest that we wait until a few spectators arrive. Maybe just wait maybe 2 minutes.
Okay.
I'll start now, Aiko. Tu peux y aller, Aiko, et moi je démarre, j'ouvre pour le public.
Ok, il est 37, je vous ouvre maintenant, vous pouvez commencer à 38. Ok.
38, ok, on y va.
Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to open this Dialogue and Inclusion Series, first edition ever of UNESCO. I am Gabriela Ramos. I am the Assistant Director General for Social and Human Sciences, and I will be your host, and it is my pleasure. As I said, this is the very first edition of this Dialogue and Inclusion Series of UNESCO, in which we want not only to share with you the efforts that UNESCO is doing to build more peaceful and cohesive societies and to fight discrimination and anti-racism, but more than anything, we want to bring to light and we want to have a space when we can have a conversation with the most aspiring figures in our world for inclusion, for peace, and for fairness. And I'm so pleased to share with you, well, I'm told that I need to tell you that there is a French and English interpretation. So if you click in your bottom down at the seminar, you will be able to see it. But then with this information, I'm so pleased to tell you that to launch this series, because we're going to have monthly discussions with inspiring leaders on this field, but to launch this series, we're really honored to have the Nobel laureate, Peace Laureate, Kailash Satyarthi. Kailash is bigger than life. He's a great friend of UNESCO, but a great friend of children's rights. He has been a promoter, a defender, and a real force for good for children, not only in terms of advancing their rights and advocacy and mounting campaigns that have been impactful all over the world, but also by very hands-on activities that have saved no less than 100,000 children from slavery. I met Kailash many years ago, and this unfatigable work that he's doing to put children right where they belong, enjoying their childhood. And I have to say that it's great to open this series with him, with his experience, and what we had to say to you, to the public that are joining us. Let me just say a word of his endeavors. As I said, he's a child advocate. He founded the Kailash Satyarthi Child Foundation to advance the rights of children, but actually to give children a childhood a second chance, because he's saving kids from slavery, from the most egregious and terrible form of slavery. And he has been doing this for quite some time. So now I just want to say that we join him in many ways. As my dear friend Andreas Socorso, who is in the public, and she introduced me to Kailash, she said, we all need to support Kailash in this endeavor. And this is also part of the Inclusion series. We want to make known, of course, he's known, he has a movie, The Price of Free. He has been launching campaigns all over the world. He meets with leaders all over the world. He has impacted the G20. He has advanced child advocacy in the UN system. But in any case, I think that she continues to need the support of everybody. And this year, 2021, is the year that has been declared by the United Nations as the year against child slavery. So how best to start this conversation that with Kailash core to it. And finally, let me just say that for UNESCO, we are advancing, and because our members have asked us to advance a more powerful agendas against racism and discrimination, and we'll be launching a roadmap, and this conversation will help us to advance these efforts. So Kailash, I want you to just say some introductory remarks, and then we will start the conversation that I'm sure is going to be inspiring as usual every time that we meet with you. So please. You are muted, my dear.
Talking to you in your new position. I had several chances to discuss on various occasions in your previous role, but I would begin with congratulating you for assuming this very, very important and timely position. I would also like to congratulate your leadership for initiating this inclusion series, and I'm fortunate to be with you. It's very, very important topic and situation now in the post-pandemic era, and a lot of work has to be done. And as you said rightly, that the forces are so strong, which are reversing the progress we have made in past several decades, and therefore the collective efforts and synergies of our endeavors is very much needed. So I would be very happy to discuss with you on this matter. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Kailash, and I'm sure that the public that is watching us, but more than anything, this video is being recorded and is going to be doing a whole campaign actually to make your work known. As I said, many people know you, many people follow you, many people support you, but the fight against child slavery never stops, and we need to continue supporting you. I want you to start by asking you a personal question, Kailash, because since I joined you in Delhi and then in Jordan, and your latest effort, which is the Fair Share campaign that I invite everybody to follow, the Fair Share for children in terms of fair share of resources, fair share of protection, fair share of policies in the post-pandemic world. I want you to tell our audience, why did you started this, Kailash? When did you wake up one day, being in your comfortable house in India, a well-respected writer, defender of child rights, we know. But when did you say, I'm going to get hands-on and free children from this, from the scourge of slavery?
Thank you. If you allow me, I will share two incidents actually. One was the first spark, and the second was the final decision. So the first spark did not come when I was comfortably sitting in my home, but when I went to school for the first time at the age of five and a half. In fact, when I was entering in my school building, I saw a boy my age sitting outside the school gate. He was a cobbler, and he was looking at children like us, whether we can give him some job. And since we were all wearing new shoes, so there was no question of shoe polishing or shoe repair. So I saw his empty eyes and took those eyes inside my classroom. And the first question I asked to my teacher was that, sir, why a child is sitting outside the school gate when all of us are sitting inside? My teacher tried to convince me. He said, calm down, this is not new. The poor children have to help the families, they work, and so on. But when I came back from school in the afternoon, I saw the boy was still sitting under the open sky along with his father. I asked this to my family, my other friends, and the answer was more or less same, that the poor children have to help families and they have to work. Nothing is uncommon in it. But for me, it was uncommon because every morning and afternoon, I used to look at that boy. And that made me angry from inside. And one day I gathered all my courage and went straight to him and his father. So this 5-6-year-old boy could not answer, he was shy. But his father stood up with folded hands in this Indian, caste hierarchy. Normally, they belong to the lowest caste strata. So this man stood up and said, sir, I never thought about it because my father, my grandfather, my sisters, and I started going to work since our childhoods. And so is my son, he said. And then he looked at me and said that nobody has asked this question to me before. But let me tell, he said, that we people are born to work. And as a child, I could not understand that why some children are born to work at the cost of their childhood and freedom. And we are born with dreams to become anything in a life. And I started crying, and I kept on crying because I could not find answer. Answer was given by those who have some kind of mental complacency that it's a practice, it is an ongoing thing. Then I started looking the world with a different eye, that whatever people say is right may not be just, it is not be justified. Then I found that children were working on the streets and so on. This was the first spark. But since nobody was working on this issue and there were not laws, or there were old British laws in India and no organization, so I did some help here and there, but I was not believing in the conventional charity work. So after doing my engineering, and I taught in the university for 1.5 years, I gave up my career to find my own path. And I started a journal which was dedicated for the most marginalized children. And one day, a desperate father knocked my door, whose daughter was born and grew up in slavery and was being sold to a brothel. They were working at brick kilns. And when I was writing the story of that man for my magazine, I started feeling that if she was my daughter or my sister, what would I do? That was in 1980. So I gave up my pencil and I decided that I will go to rescue her and her family. That I did, but I could not rescue that day. So I had to go to the court, and the court was very helpful. So within few weeks, I was able to liberate 36 children, women, and men from slavery. And this is the first documented civil society or a civilian's effort of freeing slaves like that and slave children. And then I found the path through this girl, and I remember that cobbler boy, and I never looked back. I could find my path.
It's an amazing and human story that really touches all of us, Kailash, and I know that the public will agree with me that is just inspiring. And not only that, because we know that you don't only have this amazing empathy and compassion, which is shown in your stories. You have this grassroots movement, which is amazing. I joined you when you got these thousands of kids in Delhi for the 1 billion campaign. But also you have moved laws and regulations in the ILO, in India, and in many places, and even with the leaders in the G20. My question to you now is, how much progress, Kailash? I think that you are never complacent. Even though you have achieved so much, including this international recognition of being a laureate of the Peace Prize since 2014, I know you never stop. I know you never stop. I know that we have made progress, and there had been a reduction in the number of, at least this is a crime now, recognized everywhere, and it doesn't supposed to happen. But we still have 152 million children subjected to child labor, 88 million boys and 64 million girls, young girls. Even though we step up our efforts, even though we step up the legal frameworks, even though you and your boys and the many people that are also in this fight make progress, where are we, Kailash, in your dream to really liberate childhood from this ill?
Well, certainly we have made tremendous progress in the field of child rights and human rights, in education, in decline of child labor, and establishing, human rights in the constitutions and laws across the globe. But when you are talking about these 152 million children, it is not a number. They are all breathing human beings. They have hearts, they have minds, they have eyes, they have soul. And they are all our children. But to put it in context, this number is equal, or even the number of school-age children of United States and Europe combined is lower than this number of 152 million. 10% of our children are working in mines and factories and fields and farms and household works and so on. Good news is that until 1990, we did not have the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Until 1999, we did not have any international law against child slavery, trafficking, use of children in conflicts and illegal armies and petty crimes and hazardous occupations. I mean, the worst forms of child labor. So in terms of policies and laws, we had made progress. We have also seen that in the last 20 years, the number of child laborers has decreased from 250 to 152. That is a proof that if we really wanted to do, we can achieve. This eradication of child labor is within our reach. But if you compare with the situation of other progress made in technology, in wealth, for example, we have, the world has earned an extra $30 trillion in last 20 years. If 2%, just 2% of it might have been spent for education of every child in primary and secondary school age, then in last 20 years, every child would have been in school and there was no child labor or very little child labor. But we have not done enough. We had made some progress during, say, 1990 or year 2000 to 2010. But again, there's some stagnation now. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, the progress is under serious threat. We cannot afford to turn the clock back, but we fear that millions of additional children may join the workforce and may be pushed into child labor and may not be attending schools. So these are the serious challenges which we have to accept. So a lot of work has to be done.
And you are doing it, and we are supporting you. But you're right that we cannot stop talking about these issues. We cannot stop putting the evidence up front. We cannot stop bringing the stories, the headlines, and as you say, the human stories that are behind every single case that you are touching upon. But now we are, as you say, in the context of COVID. And I feel that our governments are overwhelmed. The pandemic, I mean, we have been for 1 year, and I would have loved to visit you, Kailash, and do this interview in person, but we're still in these conditions. And what we know is that COVID has been a magnifier of the vulnerabilities that we had before, particularly the inequalities, particularly the lack of protection through certain groups, particularly those that are already in very, very fragile situations. And if we consider children, they are just right there. And so the point here is, how do we ensure that with all of the competing objectives that governments have in saving lives, in supporting the health sector, in keeping the schools running, in keeping the economy going, which is something that everybody has tried to advance, in getting the vaccine also to their populations. How do we manage to get this fight against child slavery not to be lost in the myriad of objectives? And I want you to touch specifically, Kailash, because I think that was a very smart move to launch the Fair Share campaign. So if you can bring us a little bit, our public, on what are the objectives, how did you frame it? UNESCO is very proud, and I speak on behalf of DG Azulay, to be part of your campaign. But I want you to tell us, because we will continue putting the rights of children in the table of decision makers, not to leave them behind. So what's the Fair Share campaign? How can we help? What's your objective there?
Thank you. Gab, this is not simply the crisis of health or crisis of economy. This pandemic is also crisis of justice. It's a crisis of humanity. And I would call it the crisis of civilization, because our priorities, our thinking, our lifestyle, everything is supposed to be changed. I will give you one example that the world has allocated, in fact, the rich countries mainly, $8 trillion as COVID-19 response fund. And we have done a research and found that only 0.13% of this $8 trillion, not even 0.5%, has been allocated for the most marginalized children and their families, their parents. This shows that we have not yet prioritized our children. Forget about prioritizing. We are not prepared to give them their fair share. And I would say that it has been the irony that for ages and years, we have considered that the children are the part of family, children are the part of society, children are the part of rest of the things. It's true, but they also have their own rights. They are also human beings. And their priorities are much more important, because education is their key priority. Taking care of their health in their initial age is important. But we have not been able to give them fair share for so many decades or centuries, perhaps. So this is the time that we have to think of giving them fair share. We demanded this during the pandemic and the COVID-19 response fund allocation. But now we realize that this is the good time when the United Nations is marking this year as International Year for elimination of child labor. And we should remember that the commitment made in the development goals is that we have to eradicate all forms of child labor by 2025. So 2021 is a very critical year. So a group of Nobel laureates, world leaders, former presidents and prime ministers, the United Nations agencies like yourself and ILO and others, similarly, the Interparliamentary Union, student unions and youth organizations, faith institutions, and individual corporations and the group of corporate sector and employers have come together, and we have launched this campaign, Fair Share to End Child Labor. Fair Share to End Child Labor is based on the principle of justice and the principle of human rights, child rights. Fair share in funding. That means in budgetary allocations as well as the ODA. Fair share in policies, laws, and their implementation for children. And the fair share in social protection programs. This is our basic demand and ask that the fair share should be given in this. This means while the budgets are being announced, the governments and parliaments have to ensure that there should be a fair share for children, for their health, for education, and the well-being and protection. So this campaign is all about giving justice, ensuring justice to all our children who are most marginalized, particularly when the world is facing a common crisis now. In the campaign, we also decided among the various groups that the survivors should be on the top of the agenda. The survivors should be leading the campaign, and their voices must be heard in every fora, everywhere. We are also demanding the United Nations special session on child labor on goal 8.7, particularly when the UN is marking this year. So we are trying to involve the youth and all other possible groups. And we are happy to say the student unions and teachers unions. I would like to underline here that the teachers who might be listening to this conversation have always been on the forefront in the fight against child labor, in the fight for quality, inclusive education for all, for inclusion and against discrimination. But they have also been on the forefront as warriors during the pandemic. They have made lot of efforts, a lot of sacrifices, I would call. So I would also like to use this opportunity to congratulate the education community as whole during this pandemic and their championship.
That's core of UNESCO and music to our ears, Kailash, because indeed education is core to not only to keep children safe at school, but also as a solution to this. And I will come back to that. I only want to tell our public and anybody that is looking at us and will look at us, just go to the web, tape a Fair Share, Kailash, and try to support. I think that this is a call to everybody. As I said, UNESCO was pleased to join the campaign, and this is a call to policymakers to prioritize, to dedicate the necessary funds for the most vulnerable children. But as Kailash has mentioned, this is a whole of a society effort that needs to be put in place. And talking about UNESCO, Kailash, of course, one of the main concerns is that education was disrupted. Now the majority of countries, and UNESCO was at the forefront, ADG Giannini, who leads the efforts in the education sector, launched this coalition for keeping education going. But we are also concerned because it's usually those at the bottom of our societies that will actually not going to go back to schools. We know that education is key to the solution. We know that the education systems need to support this effort. but we also know that they're now struggling, and they might leave many kids outside that will never come back, particularly girls. And therefore, how would you partner with the education system? How do we advance the agenda in the education system, not only to deliver what we are called to deliver, with good quality education for all, but particularly for those that are at risk of not coming back and then fall prey to this terrible situation that you are fighting against? So what about education, Kailash?
Well, you have rightly pointed out this danger which is looming on our head. 1.2 billion children, school-going children, have suffered, and many of them may not come back to school. I would underline one thing, that the three things make a full triangle: eradication of child labor, quality education for all children, and the poverty alleviation are interconnected issues. If we are not able to educate our children and give them free, good quality, inclusive education, quality education, then they are bound to remain as child laborers. And in turn, their parents may remain jobless. We know that almost 150 million children are working as child laborers. On the other hand, 200 million adults are jobless. And there are many studies in some countries which reveal that parents who are not given or not ensured jobs for more than 100 days a year, their children are most vulnerable, and they fall into child labor, slavery, and their school is denied. So that makes a vicious circle: the illiteracy, poverty, or unemployment of adults, and child labor. Every single child is working at the cost of one adult unemployment, the adult job. We also know, we have enough knowledge, I tell you, we have solutions also. Mm-hmm. It's very clear that we cannot mitigate any health crisis or economic crisis without an education, good quality education. There are empirical evidences, and there are plenty of researches done by you, UNESCO and World Bank, and jointly, which prove that how education is important in economic growth. And that is a strong argument which we have to put forward, that the mitigation of this crisis also linked with the good quality education. And education is not possible without eradication of child labor. This is one. The second thing is, much more work is needed for mutual coordination and cooperation between the relevant or related agencies, United Nations agencies, which are dealing with different aspects of children. Education cannot be separated with labor aspect or with trafficking. So UNODC and then ILO and UNICEF, UNESCO have to work together more rigorously. I know that there are many occasions and many platforms, but much more is needed to be done at the top level, from the Director General's level, to bring the issues of child in priority. And the same thing should be done at the national level, because there's a lot of fragmentation between various ministries and departments. Those who are dealing with children, health department, labor department, child welfare department, and child defense department, education department. But these departments and ministries have to learn that we have to cooperate and coordinate our efforts together, because there is a inherent interrelationship between these problems as well as in the solutions. So that's another thing we have to do. But most important is that we have to prioritize our children in budgetary allocations and plannings. We have to prioritize our children and give them fair share in ODA and social development programs. That is much more needed. That requires adequate amount of political will. That requires social will as well. So it is important to mobilize society on one hand and create a popular demand, a mass demand at grassroots level, at country level, using the evidences from the ground to sensitize and motivate politicians to take strong measures.
It's interesting because what you're talking about not being what you do day by day, but the experts on governance issues are always asking about this integrated approach, this holistic approach, and not having silos dealing with the issues. And this is core to what UNESCO is also trying to do, in particularly in my sector, with the fight against inequalities and the anti-racism roadmap, because you really need the convergence of many policies. And this brings me to something I want you to share with the public, because you have a very well conceptual framework of what you do, as you have shown here. But you do that on practice, Kailash.
I tell you, it's not because me or my colleagues. I learned from the people like you, and I've been learning when you were in OECD. And I learned a lot from my friends in UNESCO. Mr. Masura, when he was the Director General, we were so friendly, and I could learn a lot from him. And Irina Bukova, my sister and a great friend. So we worked together, and coming to UNESCO office is always a learning. And I visited hundreds of times.
You're so nice, Kailash. But I want you to share with the before we get into my last question, I want you to share with the public, Kailash, because more than this amazing intellectual power that you have, learning by others as we all do, but this is just really a construction conceptually that is just bulletproof. But I also want you to share with our friends, how do you deal with the kids? Because you have an ashram. So you go out and you talk to Chancellor Merkel, you talk to DG Guterres, you talk to everybody. But at the same time, with your wonderful wife, with your wonderful teams, you go and take care of children with an holistic approach, because you have this ashram. So I want you to tell you, and I was really touched when I joined you in this campaign in India with the president, that all the speeches, very nice commitments, but the core of the celebration were all these kids that you have saved when they were young, and they were performing this music that was amazing. So, because we also have an art labs in my sector, which is using art to overcome trauma. So tell us a little bit about the ashram, and then I will go to the last question about your advice to UNESCO on this front. So what about you're dealing with the kids and these human beings that you have touched in their lives?
Okay, so I will put on my clock when you start the last question, because then I'm going to charge the consultancy fees when you are giving advice. I was just kidding. Anyway, so I am right now, actually, I am in ashram with my children, and they are immense source of hope which is much more needed all the time, but particularly this time. I tell you one story that when this pandemic was worst in the villages near ashram, and my children who were freed from slavery and child labor, we are trying to give them basic education, but they also teach us a lot. They teach us simplicity, they teach us love, kindness, compassion, they teach us truth and transparency. So it would be wrong to say that we teach them everything, they teach us more. And so these children felt that there is serious scarcity of masks and knowledge, the information. So these former child slaves and child laborers resolved among themselves that in their workshops, because some of the children were learned stitching, so they decided that every child out of 80, 90 children, everybody will learn some stitching, and then they are going to stitch masks, face masks to distribute to the needy people, villagers, because it was very expensive and the masks were not available in the shops, and it's a small village. There are neighboring villages which are very poor. And then the groups were created by children those days before the lockdown began. They went and used this public microphone system and started educating people about safe distancing or social distancing and clean hands and so on and so forth. So these are those children. One can learn compassion from them, and one can learn to take initiative and leadership from them. So we are here. So they give us inspiration, and their inspiration is always my wealth. And I have learned to remain a child from them and from other children across the world. Because as I said, that childhood is not the age, it's a virtue, it's a value, it's simplicity, it's openness, it's kindness and love. So if you have that kindness and love, which you have, and many of my friends, including Angel Guria, he is a child. You are a child inside you, because you can love the people without any expectation of return. You are doing what you want to do. So that freedom of mind, which comes from an inner child. So I have learned that everybody should try that the inner child should not be killed. He or she should not die, and she should always remain in our hearts, so that we can, when we go and talk to the world leaders, when we go and talk to the heads of United Nations agencies and others, corporate leaders, then that inner child should speak out the truth to the power. And that is something which we can learn, and we are learning from the children here.
That's amazing. That's amazing, because I would have quote you when you, in the many instances that you have gone and say, let children be children. And I always repeat that because it's really powerful. But now you're telling me, let adults be children.
Yeah,
let
adults remain the children.
So you're always ahead.
I tell you that I always say one thing, that if you see the world with a child's eye, then the world is beautiful. The world is beautiful. But when we see the world with a lot of layers of knowledge, layers of information, layers of confusion, layers of whatnot, layers of identities and borders and boundaries, so many layers we put on our eyes, and then we see the world. And then we try to solve the problem. If we cannot see the world clearly with clean eyes, how can we solve the problems? And unfortunately, most of us do this a different way.
Too many theories, so few good judgment. That is what children have. No, but Kailash, we can go on and on and on. It's just a pleasure to listen to you, and I'm sure that those that are listening to us now would agree with me. But we need to come to an end. I think that you really you are our godfather of this dialogue and inclusion series. It's a great omen that we started with you with this fantastic message. Of course, we could have gone and talked about youth. That is one of the areas in which I need to work in the social and human science sector. Gender, because I know that you also care particularly for girls that are suffering their very specific way in which violence is posed upon them. But there will be many conversations. What I want you to tell us by closing, and now is me asking for your advice, is what would you ask UNESCO? I know that you have asked us to join the Fair Share. UNESCO is a champion for children. This is our core. My sector is a champion for inclusion, fight against inequalities. As I said, we're going to launch a roadmap against anti-racism, anti-discrimination, all these ills that have been just unlocked by the pandemic. And therefore, I just want you to provide us with simple advice, as you said, coming from a child's heart, to make our work better and to have higher impact, as you have had for these many years.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would, as I congratulate you before, but I would definitely applaud and encourage the work of inclusion which you are leading now. there is very direct connection between the discrimination with child labor and slavery. In whole my life, I've realized not only in India, but globally, in South Asia and particularly the caste hierarchy, the social discrimination this region is facing has impacted badly on the lives of the marginalized people and the discriminated people, excluded people. And their children are the worst victims of child labor and slavery and denial of education. Similarly, we have seen in other countries, in Africa and other places, that those who were the victims of racial discrimination in the past, their children are also facing the economic discrimination and disparities and eventually child labor and other kind of problems. One example that, just think that if a child works in Africa, Latin America, or Asia to produce something, a cloth or a football or anything which is used in United States or in Germany, it's allowed. But child is not allowed to work in Germany or United States to produce the same thing which the Americans or Europeans are using. This is discrimination. This perpetuation of child labor in the supply chain is also the perpetuation of this difference, and that is unacceptable. And that's why people like us have been fighting for inclusion in different ways. And this series and your initiative is important. Having said that, UNESCO can play definitely a very, very important role, which you are already doing for the holistic approach, keeping education in the nucleus, then look into other aspects of labor and health and protection of children with different agencies. That should be much more proactive and much more dynamic, perhaps, with the measurable indicators in the coming years, for the coming years, considering 2025 is the year for elimination of child labor, the timeline. Finally, I would say that since the campaign has been officially launched, the Fair Share campaign, and we are working very closely with the teachers' organizations and teachers' unions, UNESCO can be a strong partner in disseminating this information and basically the philosophy, the idea of fair share for children in all walks of life. So that could be done through education ministers, that could be brought into the education ministers conference and other high-level conferences through you. So linking education with child labor, but also linking education with discrimination and the efforts for inclusion could be a very important thing. So while you are talking of racial discrimination on issues like that, it would be very, very useful and helpful that the UNESCO can also help in bringing out this message to the governments and UNESCO regional offices and UNESCO country offices. And we would be very happy to work closely with the UNESCO offices at the country level on this issue of pushing for fair share. And that means the demand which we have collectively raised for years through the Global Campaign for Education, through the Global March Against Child Labor, with UNESCO, and I was the part of the high-level group on education, which was initiated and led by the UNESCO's Director General for many years, almost 10 decades, or sorry, 1 decade or so. And then we learned that civil society, the governments, national governments, and UNESCO with other agencies' coordination can definitely achieve this goal. As I said in the beginning, that eradication of child labor, eradication of discrimination, as well as eradication of all forms of exploitation and illiteracy is not only possible, but it is achievable, it is attainable, and we will do.
Of course we will do, with your energy and your passion and your friends, because we joined the Fair Share campaign, and I'm reminding everybody that is listening or will listen to this conversation to support the Fair Share campaign. We will do it at UNESCO. As you know, we are part of it, and we're part of your followers, your friends, and those that believe that your cause is one of the most important endeavors that we should undertake. It has been my pleasure. And I have to say, actually, Kailash, that our office in Delhi, Juan Pablo Miranda, who is our man there, the ambassador of India to UNESCO, Mr. Sharma, but all our field offices are connected and will be following up on this. This was the first series of dialogue and inclusion for UNESCO. We are so proud to have Kailash Satyarthi, unfatigable defender of children's rights, joining us and being the first to launch this series, or godfather. I'm Gabriela Ramos. I'm the assistant director.
I'm a child. I cannot be a father or godfather, Gabriela.
Okay, our godchild. And I really want to thank you for this conversation. I want to thank everybody that joined us. Keep us posted, Kailash. And I would say to the rest of those that are joining us today, you should watch this space. We will continue working with Kailash, but we will be holding monthly conversations. Next time is with Martin Luther King, another great champion. But for now, just big thanks to Kailash. Thanks to bringing hope to so many children of the world. You are our inspiration. And so great to have you for this first edition, and we'll continue working with you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You are always my strength, Gabriela, since we met, and UNESCO has always been a great partner and friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A bientôt.
A bientôt.